be hard. No one is promised an easy ride. Every man faces challenges in life. Some are seasons of strength, while others feel like you're just hanging on, trying to catch your breath. But no man was meant to fight alone. Every fighter needs a corner, a place where you're strengthened, where truth is spoken, where you're reminded of who you are. This is Cornermen, a place for Christian men who want to grow stronger, not just on the outside, but in character and faith. Honest conversations anchored in biblical ground. Real encouragement for the battles we all face. Each episode will discuss issues that men are dealing with. We'll hear from men who have walked the road and unpacked the practical ways to live out their faith where it really matters. At home, at work, and in the quiet moments of life when no one else sees. So wherever you're watching from, welcome to Cornermen. Take a breath from the issues of life. Reset your strength, as this week we cover the topic of identity.
Yeah, there was a time, it was back in 2012, the GFC just hit and I had a series of events happen in a small amount of time. I'd broken my little toe, and the day after that I snapped my bicep, and 6 weeks after that I went through bankruptcy. And I just remember it was probably the toughest time I feel as a Christian. And yeah, the person that really was in my corner was my wife. I remember when I had to tell her, I was freaking out, but she just said, they can't take our love and we can just start again. So it was a very good moment.
A few years ago, God actually led me to somebody who had similar struggles in life, and I reached out to them through social media. And we caught up for a coffee and we connected instantly because of the things that we had shared through our lives. Being somebody, I had recently gone through a lot of issues, he had been through them as well, but being an older gentleman, he was able to talk me through it. He was very knowledgeable with the Bible and with faith, and was really able to show me the tools to use to depend on God and to get through things.
I'd have to say going to church, I've always looked at church as like the boxing ring, where, you go out and you have a round and it's a tough round, you go back to your corner and then your trainer speaks to you. Like church for me is like I look at, God is my head trainer, and, he's speaking back to me to give me that word of encouragement to go through another round, and that's, helps me get through the week.
I can sometimes fall in the trap of getting stressed out, but one of the biggest things that keeps me going through is thinking of all the times that God has led me through past issues. The fact that I can rely on Him. He knows me better than anybody. He knows the beginning from the end. And because I've been through a lot of different things, I try and use that same faith, just knowing that He's got my back.
Is having some really good friends in my life. People that, I've placed in my life that can actually speak into my life. They're the people that can, tell me if I need to pull up my socks. They can speak into my life, and I've just found having those key people have been the key to my success because they keep me real, and I trust them with everything I got.
Reflecting on God as a father figure, learning about Him in the Bible, and comparing Him to what other Christian males are like in my life as well. Reflecting upon myself and seeing how I need to change and grow to be more like Him.
I don't see a lot of this today, but I'd say to younger people, look to people who are older than you and know that they've walked the road before you, and listen. Don't feel that you think you know everything, and it's better to learn from someone else's mistakes than make the mistakes yourself.
Don't hold things in. I suffered through addiction for a long time in my life when I was younger, and I didn't speak to anybody about it, and it nearly destroyed my marriage, and it caused a lot of issues in my life. And when I came out with it to my wife and then eventually family, it released this huge burden off my life. And since then, getting to know God and what He's like and changing who I am has given me so much confidence to be able to speak about it. So definitely finding people you can trust to talk about things.
I find that question to be probably one of my easiest ones because of living a life before Christ and now living with Christ. You know, I've got to experience what the world's like, and nothing compares to Jesus. You know, I remember when I won my world title, though that was a great moment, but nothing beats my salvation.
You know, the world is getting so messed up, and I find it easy to look at the Bible and how we should be as Christians, and that's how we should live, because you can see, if you're living that out in your life, you can see God working through you in every way. Not just, you know, the favor that you have on your life, but how it affects other people as well. And I reflect on other people who don't know God, and you can see their life is in tatters. They have nothing to follow. They don't know how to live. And so I find it like, there's no other way but to live by the Bible. And when you do, you're going to see the fruit of it.
I'll never forget, because it was such a significant part of my life. You know, and I remember, you know, walking into church. It was a big church of 3,000 people. There was one chair at the back of the auditorium, and I just remember sitting in that chair, and it was like a seatbelt came over me, and you know, the pastor was just talking about the unconditional love of God, and I just could not stop weeping. And I mean, I cried and cried like I'd never cried before. And I remember after that service, I was sort of told, you know, best thing is to go and see the pastor, and I didn't know the pastor of this church, but I rang up the front office, and I remember in the front office they said, "Oh, you're the crying guy." And I thought, that's nice, that's my new nickname, the crying guy. But I remember when the pastor said to me, he goes, "Look," he was a little bit busy at that time, there was a travelling minister there, and he said to me, "Can you come and catch up with me in a couple of days?" And being the person that I am, I was like, yeah, no worries, you know. And I just remember I really wanted to see him. But then the best thing that came out of that night I went back to church, and my life was turned around, it changed. I was healed that night. I found myself healed from my drug addiction. And I just remember it was like, through my whole journey, my whole relationship has been straight to Jesus, not man and then Jesus. And it's always been the thing that I think has held me to who I am today as a believer.
Yeah, two of the most memorable moments my life changed. One was probably 9.5, 10 years ago now. I told my wife I had been struggling with an addiction for probably 12 years. And she kicked me out of home, and that led down a really dark route for me, like feeling completely empty. And that made me have to search for God and find Him and to learn about Him, because I had been distant from Him and I didn't understand what a relationship with God was like. One of the second most defining moments was finding His presence. So when I went through this hard time with my wife, I saw a counsellor, and she got me to think of this place in my head where it was peaceful. And I imagined myself on this hill overlooking this big valley, and I was all alone. And fast forward a couple of years, while I was on this faith journey, I would always speak to my mother about it, who's a very spiritual woman, and she said, "You need a place where you can speak to God." And so I was at home one day, working from home, no one was there, and all of a sudden I felt this immense presence from God, and I immediately started to cry. And when I closed my eyes, it was like a sunrise, and I saw Jesus there, and He reached out to me, and He grabbed my hand and He walked me up that hill, and He said, "You were never alone." And that is the biggest, most powerful moment I've had with Jesus one-on-one. And that has really, I suppose, taken me to a new level with Him, because I now understand what a relationship is like with Him, and that I was never alone.
When I grew up in an Italian family, mum and dad, 2 brothers and a sister. Everything before 12, we had a great family, a lot of fun, a lot of stuff going on. Then I remember the day that my dad, he gave me a hug, told me he loved me, and said, "I'll see you next weekend," and never saw him again. 18 months later, we got a phone call that he'd had a massive heart attack and died. And yeah, my life went upside down. And there's been a fair journey, and one day I'll get to tell the whole story. But I'm thankful that Christ came into my life and healed and changed who I am today.
I grew up in a Christian home, going to church and a Christian school. My parents were very Christian, if you'll say. My mum was really spiritual. My dad was really like, this is how the world is, this is how you should be, and that's it. And so I knew how I should act. I had a couple of years where I didn't go to church. I wasn't interested, I didn't have the time, but ultimately I always knew how I should be. But I didn't understand what a relationship with God was like until I went through that hard time with my wife. I think a few things to this. One is knowing what our Father is like, but also knowing how we should be and how He portrays us, because that gives us confidence in who we are if we're living according to Him. And that's also going to flow through to the way we interact with people, with our wives, with our children. We obviously need to be led by the Bible because that's going to guide us in every area of life. But not just reading about it, but practicing it in every area of your life.
I've had the privilege of being able to train high-profile players. And I remember saying this to one guy that, what makes a man is having a soft heart and being tough-skinned. And he couldn't understand. He thought having a soft heart meant that was a sign of weakness. But after spending like 4 weeks with me and understanding and seeing what a real man is and understanding what a soft heart is that out of that soft heart, that's where the strength of a man comes from.
One of the things I try to do is reflect upon my life, how I was brought up, some of the things that affected me as well, but take it from a biblical perspective so that I can learn and try and bring up my family the right way and lead my wife the right way. I think it's important as men is that we understand, one, our Father, but how we should be as men biblically, and be vocal about that, but also live how we should be. Not just have the opinion about it or shy away from it, but show that to everybody.
I know that myself as a dad, my job is to bring my family, from my son Orlando, my daughter Cass, my other daughter Sage, and my wife, is to bring them to Jesus and let Jesus be the center of their life. As a dad, that's my even my ministry at home is to direct them to Jesus, because Jesus can do more than what I can. This is I think a question that I think a lot of people as Christians or Christian men go through. You're never wanting it to be cliche, but I know as a Christian man I've been knocked down a few times, and a few times that when I've been knocked down I've never lost sight of who Jesus is. But I feel the trials and tribulations through that. Sometimes in forgiving someone can be a little bit hard. It's time, and I've learnt that God's patient with me, and that as I go through the journey, I start to understand grace more, and just I feel the presence of God start working in me. And sometimes it's straight away, sometimes it can be a little longer, but I just know through the journey God is with me all the time.
One of the big things I do is reflect on what God's already done for me. He's done amazing things in my life, big and small, but I know that it's been Him. And I think you always need to find a positive in every situation. Even if your world is falling apart, you've got to find something to learn and something to grow, because everything good comes from God, and He knows your beginning from the end. And so if you lean on Him, you can always learn something, and it's going to help you grow and become more resilient. Again, also remembering what He's done for you in the past. Even if journaling helps you remember those, I don't think we should forget them, because it's so important.